Maybe it was her mother or something, Maomao said. That seems like a safe guess. Even though they do not look much alike, NN said. All three of them felt spent. Was this what all that stress had been for? Jazzgirl was communicating something to the woman, pointing at Maomao and the others. Perhaps you are the ones who saw Jazzgirl safely here, the woman asked them. She had an accent, but she was perfectly understandable. She was by the canal over there. She seemed to want snacks, Yao said. Ah, so that is what happened. In short, Jazzgirl's companion had been here, but they had gotten separated. The girl hadn't known which shop was which. It was ironic that it was so close. I must apologize. This child was very determined to go out there. While the woman chatted, the shopkeeper rifled through the shelves, looking for whatever she had ordered. Oh, I know this place, NN said when she saw the logo on some wrapping paper. The paper was not very high quality, but it was good enough for its purpose. What's the story? Maomao said. Nothing really. I just realized this place has dealings with the mansion. Presumably that meant Yao's home. Here we are. This is all we have in stock at the moment. Is that all right? The shopkeeper asked. HNGH, Yao exclaimed when she saw what he was holding. It was a bundle of frogs, stretched, dried and packed together like a small bouquet. Perhaps the girl had seen the children catching crayfish and become excited, thinking they were after frogs. She was disappointed, of course. Maomao thought there were so many different kinds of frogs. If these frogs were being used for a fancy person's snack, they wouldn't be like a frog you could just pick up off the street. Frogs, the word reminded her of something in the corner of her memory, a decent-sized thing that one might call a frog. She shook her head. The shock of it still came into her mind sometimes. What are those for? Yao asked. Maomao thought they were probably a nice, cool summer snack. The fat on the reproductive organs of certain female frogs that lived in the countryside was gooey and delicious, as Yao should have known very well. I suppose she is better off remaining in the dark. And there you had it. Yao whispered to NN, so outlanders really do eat snakes and frogs. NN replied, innocent as a dove, yes, so it would seem. However, as far as Maomao was concerned, there was a problem with what the outlanders were buying at that moment. She started. The frogs were one thing, but they had also bought the store's entire supply of pomegranates, which were candied with rock sugar and dried figs. Is it possible we could ask you to leave just a few figs for us? That was one item on their list. Oh, I am sorry. How many do you need? The woman said. Maomao named a quantity and the woman gladly agreed. Figs are in season now. We can get them for you whenever you want. Pomegranates, well, it might be a little early yet, the shopkeeper said. Thank you very much, the woman said. Jazzgirl bowed her head politely as well. Maomao squinted at the woman's purchases. She kind of wished she could ask about them. She didn't though, both because it would be sticking her nose where it might not be welcome, and because she wasn't sure they shared enough language to make the conversation possible. The woman bundled up her items, then stood in front of Maomao and the others. Please accept this small token, she said, holding out white pieces of cloth, one for each of them. This is for taking such good care of Jazzgirl. Then the foreign customers left the shop. Maomao touched the fabric and exclaimed, excuse me. Before she could follow the woman, the shopkeeper said, your items are ready. By the time they had collected their purchases and left the shop, the two foreigners were nowhere to be seen. What's got you so worked up? Yao asked. This cloth, Maomao said, giving it a gentle flap. It looked plain and white, but the corners were worked with elaborate embroidery of grass and trees. It's cool to the touch. I would assume it is silk. Yes, it is. What about it? It was easy for the girl from a life of luxury to say that. Maomao spread her hands and shook her head in a gesture of exasperation. Lady Yao. A piece of silk is a very generous reward for something as simple as helping a lost child. At least to us ordinary people. Yes, of course, I knew that. Yao was pretty cute. NN was flashing Maomao a thumbs up from where Yao could not see. These outlanders could buy up a store's stock and hand out silk like candy. We are dealing with some rich folk here. Maomao sighed, thinking maybe she should have been a little more agreeable. At that moment a bell rang, signalling the hour. The time, all three of them exclaimed. It was long past when they were supposed to return. They ended up running as fast as they could again. Chapter 13 Lady-in-Waiting to His Majesty's Younger Brother. For days after their shopping expedition, Maomao found herself doing the same thing day in and day out, washing and disinfecting bandages. The medical assistants were all getting pretty tired of it when a message arrived. Specifically a message for NN, just for me, she asked. I wonder what it could possibly be, said a most intrigued Yao, taking a peek. Out of the three of them, she was the most fully developed, but her behavior, including her bouts of unabashed curiosity, reflected her age more than her looks did. It would appear to be notice of a new assignment, NN said. When they saw what it said, all three of them scowled. They looked at the physician who had brought the notice. Well, you all saw it. Even is going to have other work to do for a while. Even scowled hardest of all. I am sorry, sir, but I do not wish to be separated from Lady Yao. This assignment comes from someone you do not refuse, the physician replied. His tone was still friendly, but there was clearly no room for argument. What was written in this disturbing notice? So she is ordered to serve the Emperor's esteemed younger brother. At least for a while, Yao said, taking the paper and reading it over again. So she was going to be babysitting Jinshi. May I ask something, sir? Why me? If this is about our exams, Lady Yao achieved better marks than I did. Maomao thought that she deliberately flubbed the exam, but she was decent enough to resist saying it out loud. And I hardly think my family background makes me suited to this service, NN continued. Yao came from good stock, but NN was a commoner. Normally, one would expect the royal family's ladies-in-waiting to come from halfway respectable households. Maomao thought she had an idea as to why NN had been chosen. The doctor said, looking pleased if anything, I think he is avoiding ladies whose status is too high. Choose someone with high status, and there is a good chance she will be trying to become his wife. Jinshi was 20, a year older than Maomao, and he appeared even older. It was certainly a reasonable age for him to find a wife or consort. It was starting to seem odd that he hadn't arrived. The doctor said with that face of his, the wrong person could make his life a living nightmare. Maomao had suspected as much. NN could be warped in her own particular ways, but she was unstintingly devoted to her mistress. She would not do anything too bold with Jinshi. She was so devoted to Yao, it was clear on her face she had little interest in this position. It was rather rude of her. I heard Maomao was also considered. The physician looked outside. A man with a monocle was pressed right up against the window. He had returned from his time away. It seemed everyone was accustomed to him now. Someone with high rank had insisted she was not suited for the position, and so she was removed from consideration. As he stared intently, two of his subordinates approached from behind. They pulled him away from the window and dragged him off. Maomao wished he wouldn't return, but she knew better than to hope for much respite. The physician said, they want you there tomorrow. I know it is sudden. NN did not respond. Her face remained impassive, but she still gave off an aura of absolute disgust with the idea. She looked at Yao, hoping for assistance. Yao simply said, if family background is the issue, there isn't much we can do. Maomao had expected jealousy, but she was surprisingly receptive when presented with that reasoning. Perhaps it was because she knew how good NN was at her job. They could send you just about anywhere, NN. I hope it goes really well, she said, and flashed the other woman a brilliant smile. Maomao briefly thought that it might be her little way of getting NN back for leading her around by the nose all the time, but it didn't seem so. Yao was truly giving her blessing to this personnel transfer. She was completely oblivious to how NN felt or what she was hoping for. Yao was classically naive. NN scowled again. If her mistress had interceded at this moment, it might have saved her. But Yao had simply given her the old so long good luck. What else could NN do? Best of luck out there then, the physician said, clapping her on the shoulder. NN gave him a dejected nod. It is a lot busier around here with one less pair of hands, Yao said as she organized medicine in some drawers. She had already been talking to Maomao more, and the pace had really picked up now that NN was gone. Definitely, Maomao said. NN worked hard. She was going through medicines and sorting them into piles. Occasionally they received something unusual, but today it was all just topping off supplies of ordinary drugs. I hope she is okay. I would like to think she wouldn't be rude to His Majesty's younger brother. I'm sure she is fine. Yes, you are right. This is NN we are talking about. I'm sure it is okay. What I meant was he won't have her executed for being a little rude to him. Maomao had been thinking less about NN and more about Jinchi's personality. He was not often eager to punish people. There were times when his hands were tied and he had to do it. However, Maomao seriously doubted NN would do anything awful enough to put herself in that position. As long as she did not actively try to murder him, things should be fine. Maomao would continue doing her work as normal. Jinchi's office was more populated than usual. He held his paperwork in one hand and looked at the civil officials, soldiers and court ladies who were being introduced to him. Usually, someone with Jinchi's rank would not bother to meet every new person who was given a job. He had decided he wanted to see each of them. We will be getting quite busy, but I am confident you will work hard, he said and smiled. He did not want to create goodwill or even make his subordinates feel at ease. Not one other person there was smiling. To smile at someone could leave the other person with a good impression, but for Jinchi, a smile could also be a harbinger of disaster. On his very first day as a eunuch in the rear palace, another eunuch greeted him with a smile. Gaeshun had looked away for just a moment, and Jinchi found himself dragged into the underbrush. The men nearby may have been without their most important possessions, but that was not enough to completely rob them of their desire. The man had wanted to make Jinchi his toy. Jinchi wasn't sure how it had started, but it was clear he was in danger. Funny, he muttered to himself, I never got to look back on that and laugh. He punched the eunuch and ran. He learned that such relationships weren't uncommon among the men of the rear palace. They referred to their lovers as brothers-in-law. He didn't want to think about it. Sadly for all involved, Jinchi had no interest in such things. Is something the matter, Master Jinchi? Asked Basin, who had at last recovered from his injuries. From what Jinchi heard, he continued his daily military training without pause, even though his body was in tatters. Gaeshun seemed in disbelief at his own son's durability. It is nothing, Jinchi said. The new personnel all appeared to be safe. He had been somewhat unnerved when he heard that they simply had to hire a young lady in waiting, but so far all seemed well. Now Suhyun would stop scolding him every time he was in his room. He could not be too cautious, especially considering the recent attempted poisoning. He had to keep a sharp eye on things. Jinchi himself had hoped to bring a certain long-standing acquaintance on board, but he ended up with one of that acquaintance's colleagues instead. She was one of the court ladies from the medical office. The position was new, so the test had been made particularly difficult. One by one, the women with no aptitude for medicine had been weeded out. That assured him this young woman knew what she was doing. Everyone would have plenty to do soon, with the prince's presentation coming up. Jinchi needed to return to work, so he told them to be on their way. Once the crowd had gone, Jinchi heaved a sigh. Only Basin was in the room with him, and he would let it pass. Would you like me to prepare a drink for you, Master Jinchi? No, I do not need anything. What about you? Are you feeling better? I sincerely apologize, sir, but my morning runs are still only 2 li. I will have them back to normal in no time. That sounded like more than enough to Jinchi. He marveled at Basin's physical capacities. Basin's work had piled up during his absence, and now he was playing catch-up. He wasn't gifted at paperwork, but he was doing his best, which pleased Jinchi. Master Jinchi, Basin said, holding up a piece of paper. What do you wish to do about the Shay or Shrine Maiden who is living in the villa? Politics could be a very special kind of pain. Things that could have been easily communicated by speaking had to be announced in painstakingly detailed memos. The Shrine Maiden had arrived at the villa days ago, and now the papers about it were arriving. Jinchi had gone to give his formal greetings to the Shrine Maiden, but that was all. He had been under the impression that someone else was dealing with the matter, so imagine his surprise when it landed in his lap. It is my problem now, is it? He looked at the mountain of paperwork and sighed again. What else was there to do? Palace matters continued to come to him. He felt it was falling to him to fill the hole left by the absence of the Shi clan. Do you suppose they all hate me? He asked. No, sir. If anything, I should think they adore you. I wish you wouldn't say that with such a straight face. No, I think they all came here out of a genuine desire to meet you, sir. The worst part was there wasn't a hint of malice in Basin's voice. The reason court ladies weren't allowed in his office was that so many of them would drop their papers. They did this just to have an excuse to drag out their time there. Sometimes a male bureaucrat tried the same thing. Now, anyone who dropped their papers in Jinchi's office was barred from entering afterward. Jinchi didn't think this was a real punishment for the people who dropped things. However, outsiders believed something strange was happening in there. Some people thought Jinchi's office was a place where even a small mistake would be heavily punished. Despite this, the amount of paperwork never seemed to decrease. Regarding the Shei or Shrine Maiden, yes. Have the physicians visited her yet? Jinchi asked. No, sir. The plan was for Medical Officer Kan and the new medical assistants to examine her. This woman was a foreign dignitary, a Shrine Maiden. They could not casually subject her to examination by men, even though she was here for medical treatment. They would send the eunuch Kan Liuhumen, Maomao's father and Lakan's uncle. The court ladies would do the actual examination, and Liuhumen would make the diagnosis based on what they told him. It was a roundabout method at best, roundabout but necessary. The Sheyahinese delegation had requested it. Jinchi had just assigned one of the medical assistants to himself, leaving only 2 of them. At least Maomao would be there. He expected her and Liuhumen to work well together. Find out everyone's schedules and tell the medical office to set up an examination. It would be ideal to accommodate the Shrine Maiden's needs and availability as much as possible. Yes, sir. Basin quickly wrote down the orders and passed them to a messenger who waited outside the office. Is there anything else? Jinchi asked. He wanted to address the most important matters first. The bothersome annoyances that kept returning could wait. Nothing to speak of, sir. Oh, except yes. Basin looked uncomfortable. We have already received a request for transfer. He held out the written request and Jinchi took it to study. The writing was very accomplished. It must have come from someone he had met earlier. The message said a court lady named NN requested a transfer back to the medical office. Was she one of the medical assistants? Birds of a feather, as they said. A rather unusual job could attract rather unusual people. Jinchi did not want many young ladies in waiting around him. He thought that once the other women had learned what to do, they would be able to manage with one less person. If this NN could simply hold out until then, she might very well get her wish. He asked on what basis did we hire NN. She responded, she is diligent about every aspect of her work and excellent at supporting those around her. She has also been a lady in waiting since she was 10 years old, so she already knows what she is doing in that regard. She is a quick learner, but she shows no desire to advance herself in the world. I suppose that is both a strength and a weakness. Yes, that does sound promising. She also, well, this isn't precisely about her capabilities. Basin sounded awkward. He couldn't quite bring himself to look at the paper directly. Yes. Out with it, sir. There is an additional note here. It is not that she is uncomfortable around men or even specifically dislikes them. He hesitated for a very brief moment before saying, but she has shown a certain preference for women. A preference for women, meaning she was romantically interested in other women despite being a woman herself. She stays, Jinchi exclaimed, flinging the transfer request aside. Master Jinchi, she is the perfect fit. I'm not letting this one get away. He was grinning broadly as they went back to work. Chapter 14, Meeting the Shrine Maiden. Close to Arduo's villa near the court was another similar building. Its main purpose was to house foreign visitors. At the moment, the Shrine Maiden from Shea and her entourage were staying there. That was where Maomao, Yao, Liuhumen and several bodyguards went to perform her examination. Maomao recognized the guards. They were eunuchs she knew from the rear palace. With the Shrine Maiden present, the villa was a place where men were not allowed, at least to some extent. That is why they had these emasculated escorts. What an odd place, Yao commented. It was near the court, but in the opposite direction from Yao and Maomao's dormitory. They had never had a chance to take a good look at it before. Maomao had glanced at it a few times when she went to Arduo's villa. However, she only now saw that Yao was right. It did seem strange. Perhaps the style could be characterized as foreign. The architecture did not seem Sheyahinese so much as it seemed to come from somewhere farther west. Maomao had never seen such a building herself, but there were pictures of one in a book she had borrowed long ago. The construction used wood and sometimes brick. The tops of the window frames were shaped like crescent moons. The use of glass in a few places emphasized the luxury of the place. The garden contained rose arches that must have been magnificent when the flowers bloomed. The servants' uniforms were equally striking. However, the servants themselves all had dark eyes and hair, suggesting they were people from Li. You cannot easily hire foreigners to attend on a foreign dignitary, it seems. If one of them turned out to be a covert operative, it would be your responsibility. Maomao was certain that even the mud-covered middle-aged lady tending the garden had been thoroughly vetted. They entered the building and were met by a woman whose appearance clearly indicated she was a foreigner.